Welcome to Parrot Analytics Live. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to kick off with a quiz. So if you're watching this webinar on demand at a later stage, you can fast forward by about approximately 5 minutes, and that will get you straight to the main presentation. Quiz is pretty straightforward. We'll give you a question and then we'll give you three answers. And we'd love for you to participate. So just put A, B, or C in the chat box, and we'll see, how many of you get the answers right. All right, let's kick it off with our first question. Question number one: what was the most in-demand digital original in the United WandaVision? Actually, it was Cobra Kai. So a bit of a surprise maybe for some of you, but as you can see here, the purple line in the first 3 weeks of the first quarter there in the US, it spiked almost to 120 times the average TV show. Quite the achievement for Cobra Kai. Question number two: which late night network variety show topped the charts in the US in the first quarter of 2021? A, was it the Late Show with James Corden? B, Jimmy Kimmel Live? Or C, Saturday Night Live? Put your answer into the chat box and let's see what we've got for this one. It's actually C, Saturday Night Live. And you can see those weekly peaks in the purple chart, but yeah, it really is outperforming versus the rest. Okay, question number three: which country had the highest demand for the German drama Dark outside of Germany in the first quarter 2021? Have a think about this one. So what country might have the highest demand outside of Germany, its home market? Answer? Well, we'll get there. Here's the options: A, India; B, France; C, Russia. Now we're ready for the answer. Which one do you think it is? All right, Russia. So you can see there with almost 13 times the average, the demand of the average TV show. That's the next country where Dark was most in demand outside of its home market. In case you've just joined us, because we're almost on the hour, you are in the right place. This is Parrot Analytics Live, and we're just finishing up our quiz for those people that really wanted to get in early. So we've had a couple of questions. Here's question number 4. Which non-anime Japanese series was the most in demand in Japan in the first quarter of 2021? Admittedly, this is a hard one. So once again, we've got some options, but for all of our Japanese friends, you may have a lead on this. What do you think? Which one of these the most in demands in Japan? A, B, or C? The answer is A, The Naked Director, just behind Attack on Titan. Okay, last question. This is Parrot Analytics Live. We're just about to get started. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited. We've got some really great stuff to share with you today. Last question in our quiz: which series had more demand in the first 6 weeks of its first season in the US? The Boys or Stranger Things? We're going back a little bit here, aren't we? 2016, Stranger Things season 1. How did that compare to The Boys? And we're looking at both series in the first 6 weeks post-release for its first season. Now, you might be wondering, how do we get three answers for this? We do, because we're throwing in a they're about the same. Option A. B, The Boys had more demand. C, Stranger Things had more demand. Moment of pause. Here is the reveal. About the same. So if we look at the time shift chart, and we're adjusting the demand for both of those demand curves back to the point of release, which is there just at the 0 mark, we can see that demand is about the same. So approximately 40 times the demand of the average TV show. So there you go. That's demand. That's our Demand 360 platform. As we get underway today, just to let you know, thank you for turning up. We will give you 30% off our Demand 360 Lite, and I will post I will post into the chat box a special link for you to click on. But now, why are we all here? We are here to listen to the main part of the conversation. So let's get started. Thank you for joining us here at Parrot Analytics Live. In today's session, we will be highlighting the key insights from our first quarter global television demand report. My name is Samuel Stather, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Parrot Analytics. And as many of you know, we help the entertainment industry understand the global supply and demand for content in today's attention economy. We will have a few minutes at the end of the call reserved for a Q&A, where we'll address some of the questions many of you have already sent through to us. And I will be manning the chat today, and I'm looking forward to your questions. We'll pick a few of those at the end of the webinar as well. And if we don't get to all the questions today, do not worry. We will likely follow up on these with a blog post. Many of you are joining us from Europe. Thank you for spending your evening with us today. If I could see your faces, I would know for a fact that those of you in the UK have a particularly big smile on your face, given the football post-match elation, and a special welcome also to our Demand 360 Live customers, of course, and our Demand 360 Enterprise customers. We are very thrilled to have you join us today. And now I'd like to hand over to our Global Insights Analyst, Chris Hamilton. And I know Chris has been working through the presentation, and he has, he's done amazing work. And we've got so much stuff in chat here that I cannot find the handover button. So bear with me. And thank you for all of the participation as well in our chat earlier. All right, we are ready. Chris, I'm handing over to you now.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you again. And look, if you do have questions about anything that Chris is chatting to us today, please put them in the chat box and we'll be happy to help and take some of those at the end. Chris.
Great, thanks so much, Samuel. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. I hope you had some fun with that quiz. It's our first time doing it. I'm really excited to share our latest global TV demand report with you today. And as always, there's a lot of info in this report. So I just picked out some of my favorite findings to share. I also tried in particular to pull out some insights that aren't immediately obvious in the report to make this especially worth your while for showing up today. So what are we going to be looking at? This report covers demand for digital original series in the first quarter of the year, globally and in 10 specific markets. And why are we focusing on digital originals? I think this boils down to 2 points. With these series especially, there's a lack of good data on how they perform. And it's usually the case that viewership numbers are a closely guarded secret by these platforms. So we really think that we can provide particular value sharing our unique demand data on these shows. There's also a key business reason that we're looking at these series. We know that highly in-demand original series, often available exclusively on their original platform, are what drive people to sign up for these services. These shows are really the key drivers of new subscribers, which we know is so important for these streaming platforms. It's generally not the case that extensive libraries of non-exclusive or legacy content are what's driving people to sign up. So we really want to focus in on these key digital original series. All right, let's get into it. So starting with some global takeaways, I think it's good to have a high-level global view of what's going on before we get into the market-specific trends. And I thought we would start with looking at the most in-demand show by market. So here you can see the 10 markets we cover in this report. We've got some nice global variety here. And starting off, the most in-demand series globally in Q1 2021 and in the most markets we looked at, 8 out of the 10, is WandaVision. And this is probably not going to be a surprise to most of you here today. We already know that Disney Plus has demonstrated its hit-making ability. First with The Mandalorian, here we see with WandaVision, it's done it with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's continuing to do it with Loki. It's really a nonstop stream of hits coming out of Disney Plus. Now this next one was actually a bit of a surprise to me. And for those of you who showed up early enough for the very first question of the quiz, you'll already know the answer to this, but the most in-demand original series in the US in Q1 was not WandaVision, but actually Cobra Kai from Netflix. And the reason this surprised me, I think, says something about the shortness of memory, at least my own memory. So this show launched for the first time, a new season for the first time on Netflix at the very beginning of January. And at that time, it was huge, it blew up, it far exceeded its previous seasons, was in the news, hit #1 globally. But by February, I think everyone's attention had moved to Disney Plus and them starting their constant stream of hits. So it's nice to pause at the end of the quarter and reflect and realize that actually the most in-demand original series for the quarter in the US was Cobra Kai. And finally, in India, different from all the other markets we looked at, the top original series for the quarter was Mirzapur from Amazon Prime Video. And this is something about how local content really succeeds in this market, and particularly how Amazon has found the key to success here. And we're going to be talking a bit more about this later, so stay tuned. Right. So one of my favorite things about putting these reports together is that it's an opportunity to look at markets we might not normally have a chance to do a deep dive on. So we have 3 markets in this report that are featured for the first time, and those are Thailand, Romania, and Venezuela. So it was great to have a look and see what's going on in these markets. And today we're going to be looking at Thailand and Romania specifically, but Venezuela is included in the full report. So starting off, what are we looking at here? This is the global share of demand in Q1 2021 for digital originals from each of these platforms. And what do we see? So this chart kind of helps answer who's winning the global battle for attention with their originals. And Netflix has a slim majority here with 50.2%, far ahead of the others. Amazon Prime Video comes in second place with 12.2%. That puts it in an interesting position, I think, because it's really far behind Netflix's share for its originals, but it's still twice the demand share of the next largest platforms, Hulu and Disney Plus. So kind of interesting position for Amazon Prime Video. One other way you could look at this chart is thinking about it in terms of corporate demand share. So if you think about it from that perspective, we could group Disney Plus's originals and Hulu's originals together under sort of a Disney corporate share, and that puts it at 12.1%, so really neck and neck with Amazon. So a bit of a different story there when you consider that frame. And I do want to call out this chart looks completely different than it did a year ago. A year ago, we would not have had HBO Max. That's entirely new from mid last year. Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus have really grown their demand share since launching. So lots changing here. But even more is changing when you look specifically at the action adventure space. Again, so this is demand for specifically action adventure originals globally in Q1 of 2021. Sorry, no, I have 2020 there, it's 2021. So I love looking at the action adventure space because really there's a lot changing in here. And I like this chart in particular because you can see what a close battle it is between Netflix and Disney Plus this quarter. Netflix coming in with just the slightest lead at 30.3% share of demand. Disney at an even 30% share. And then behind them, we have Amazon with about 15%, HBO Max with about 14%. It's also interesting to note that the different strategies of platforms here. So Disney Plus and HBO Max, they're really leveraging these series in popular franchises. So of course, Disney has Star Wars, The Mandalorian, that falls under action adventure, but they also have all of their new Marvel series. HBO Max, they have those formerly DC Universe series. So contrast that with Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, who have more a scattered offering, not any falling under one particular franchise umbrella. And so you can see here the dramatic change that's happened in this space in particular over the past 2 years. So we have 2 platforms launching, Disney Plus first, HBO Max mid last year. And a few points I wanted to call out specifically here. So first, we've seen Disney Plus really consolidating its demand share in the action adventure space. And that hasn't just been over this quarter, that's really been since October of 2020. That's of course when The Mandalorian season 2 launched. And so you can see in the chart every month since then, it's grown its demand share. So pretty consistent growth from Disney Plus there. I don't know if it shows any signs of stopping anytime soon. One other point I wanted to make was that in the action adventure space, a highly demand original series can make a huge difference, really turn the tide. So here we have The Witcher and Umbrella Academy. We see two notable demand peaks for Netflix's demand share. So The Witcher coming at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, that was the show that really helped turn the tide for Netflix after Disney Plus had launched and helped them reclaim some of their demand share in the action adventure space. And we see the same thing again later with The Umbrella Academy forming a notable demand peak. So an individual show really can make a huge difference in this space. And the third thing I want to call out is that large gray area of demand 2 years ago. That was actually predominantly demand coming from DC Universe originals. So DC Universe, you might know, is no longer in existence. Those shows have been absorbed by HBO Max. And I think this is really a positive story for HBO Max. So 2 years ago, DC Universe was in a heated battle with Netflix for the top spot in this space. You can see at one point, I think it had a greater demand share than Netflix even. So HBO Max, by absorbing these original series, really has the goods to succeed again in this space. So I'm watching for them to release a new season of some of these highly in-demand DC Universe series, looking at Titan Season 3 in particular. And next, I wanted to take a look at not just the most in-demand series, but the most in-demand new series premieres of the quarter. So this chart is looking at global demand in the first 30 days following the series premiere for each of these shows. I think this is important to look at because when you're looking at the top shows for the quarter, it's often not the case that they're brand new series. A lot of times these shows are on their second, third, fourth season. They've had time to build awareness. People know about them. They have built up a fan base. People are excited about the next season coming out. So it really takes something special to have a highly in-demand brand new series premiere. And here we see the most in-demand new series premieres of the quarter are WandaVision, coming in at number 1 with 84 times the average series demand. And right behind it, again from Disney Plus, is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier with 83.4 times the average series demand. Now this really, I thought, was interesting to see how consistent Disney is with their hits. So they seem to have got it down to a science and are repeating their success again and again with their Marvel series here. So it seems to be a consistent hit rate with the Marvel series. Coming in third, interesting, that's Invincible from Amazon Prime Video. And at 31.5 times the average series demand in its first 30 days, it's kind of an interesting space here. So nowhere near those highly in-demand Marvel series from Disney Plus, but it's far ahead of the next 7 most in-demand new series premieres for the quarter. These are all from Netflix. So 2 points I wanted to call out, similarities among the top 3 most successful new series premieres this quarter. 1, they're all superhero series. Of course, you have the top 2 Marvel series and then Invincible. We know that the superhero subgenre is undersaturated. A lot of highly in-demand original series are coming from this subgenre. And related, these series are based on existing IP. So of course, the Marvel series, they exist in the Marvel universe. They're kind of launching with this huge global Marvel fan base. So they almost don't have to do the hard work of building awareness and building a fan base up. Kind of a similar story with Invincible, of course, not to the same extent. That is based on a comic, so it is launching based on existing IP. The other point I wanted to make was that these top 3 new series, they all released on a weekly schedule. And of course, that contrasts with Netflix's approach. The next 7 most in-demand series premieres all dropped their episodes all at once in that sort of binge release model that Netflix pioneered. So the next chart is going to be kind of looking at trends, differences in binge release and weekly release for digital original series over the last 5 years. And we can really see how the market has been moving towards this weekly release strategy. In 2017, 2018, the vast majority of new series were released on this binge release all at once episode drop schedule. That really shifted in 2019. 2019 was a milestone for this weekly release strategy for digital originals. So actually the number of series releasing that way didn't really move, but demand for these series was greater than supply of weekly release series for the first time in 2019. And that has only continued to grow since then. The number of series releasing, the number of digital originals, I should say, releasing on a weekly schedule grew every year since then. But more importantly, demand for these series has grown even faster. So I don't see this changing anytime soon. We know in 2019, that's when Disney Plus launched, Apple TV Plus launched, and both of those platforms chose to release a lot of their new series on the weekly release schedule. So really kind of shifting the industry consensus around all at once binge release seasons. All right, so those were my global takeaways. Now we're going to get into some country-specific findings. And I think these are really some of the most interesting insights. This is where you get those market-specific idiosyncrasies and nuance. So I had fun putting these together. I hope you enjoyed them too. All right, first up, we have the United States. And I've labeled them not the drama queen. And let me explain what I mean by that. Right. So here we have the US audience demand in Q1 of 2021, broken down by genre. Now you'll see that about a third of US demand for digital original series in Q1 was for a drama series. So it is the genre that accounts for by far the largest share of demand. But when you compare this across other markets, the US has a much smaller share of demand for digital original dramas. And that's because these other genres of content are really succeeding here. In particular, I wanted to call out documentary. This genre, in terms of digital originals at least, has really seen strong growth over the past few years. So I know in our 2019 report, this genre accounted for about 4.5% share of demand. In 2020, it was an even 9% share. So that's doubling year on year. And here in Q1, we see it at 9.9%, so that's a further 10% growth. But it's not just documentary. There are many other genres that have a greater share of demand in the US and other markets. So comedy, children, animation, reality, variety, these all have a larger share of audience demand in the US than they do globally or in other markets. And you can see this coming through when we look at the top 10 most in-demand subgenres of the quarter as well. So I like this chart. It looks like a rainbow. It really captures the variety of demand coming from audiences in the US. So a couple things to point out. Here we see only 3 of the top 10 subgenres are from the drama genre. In a lot of markets we look at, there are 5, 6, 7 of the top 10. So the US really is less drama dominated. This is also the only market where 2 of the top 10 subgenres for the quarter were from the children's genre. So we see school age content here and cartoons. And this was also the highest rank achieved of all the markets we looked at for comedy drama and sitcom. And we're going to look a little more at Americans' love of comedy next. So Americans love to laugh. The US was the most comedy loving market we looked at in this report. Like I said, 19% of all US demand for digital originals was for a comedy. And here we have the top 5 comedy subgenres. So we already saw comedy drama was the most popular comedy subgenre. That's a little bit of everything, comedy drama, something for everyone there. Coming in behind it was sitcom. And the next 3 most popular comedy subgenres were dark comedy, adult comedy, romantic comedy. Now the next thing I actually thought was really interesting, it was another surprise for me. So we're going to be looking at the top 5 most in-demand comedy series, digital original comedy series for the quarter. And if you had asked me if I had to guess which platform the most series in the top 5 comedies came from, I would probably have guessed Netflix. That's always a safe bet. It's a bit of a numbers game with that platform. And we already know that Cobra Kai was the most in-demand original overall for the quarter in the US. But it's actually not Netflix that has the most original series in the top 5 comedies. It's Apple TV Plus, and this was a real surprise for me. So here we see Ted Lasso coming in as the second most in-demand comedy for the quarter, with almost 20 times the average series demand. And rounding out the top 5 is Dickinson from Apple TV+. Now, of course, Ted Lasso, that was the must-watch feel-good comedy of 2020. And Dickinson, that was when Apple TV Plus launched. I thought a bit of a sleeper hit, came out of nowhere, ended up being very popular, developing a very dedicated fan base. So Apple TV Plus is really excelling in the comedy genre. And it's also not just these 2 series. They have Mythic Quest, Raven's Banquet. That's done very well. And I believe we'll see that in this most recent quarter's data when that comes through. And they're continuing to launch other comedy series too. So kind of carving out a space for themselves in comedy. All right, that was the US. Now moving on to Romania. And I really enjoyed discovering this insight. So just at a high level, what do I know about Romania? I know it's where Transylvania is, home of Dracula. So I thought this was a fun insight to see that actually Romanian audiences are horror lovers. So let me show you what I mean. All right, so in Romania, in Q1 2021, 3.8% of audience demand for digital original series was for a horror series. Now this might not jump out as being huge when compared to other genres, but remember that horror is kind of a niche genre to begin with. So we really see Romania standing out as a country that loves horror when we compare across other markets. So the 3.8% share of demand from Romanian audiences is larger than any other market we looked at in this report. It's also larger than the global average, which is 3.1%. And you can see Romanians' love of horror coming through in the top 10 subgenres of the quarter as well. So here we see suspense horror coming in, number 9, the 9th most in-demand subgenre for the quarter. And taking a broader view of what horror means, I also want to highlight thriller. So we technically consider this a drama subgenre, but I definitely think of it as being horror adjacent. So I think it's kind of interesting to see some of those audience preferences in this market spilling over to horror adjacent content like thriller. And looking at the top 5 most in-demand horror series for the quarter, we see they come from a variety of platforms. It's not one platform that's dominant in the genre in Romania. We have the most in-demand horror series for the quarter is the Twilight Zone reboot from Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus also has The Stand. That was a very timely series to come out last year. 2 shows from Netflix, and rounding out the top 5, Castle Rock from Hulu. And I did want to call out, so Paramount Plus actually had the largest share of demand in Romania of all the markets we looked at. And I think that's definitely helped by their strong horror offerings like we see here. All right. So next we're going to be looking at Portugal, and I thought this was an interesting contrast to the Romanian insight we just looked at. So within Romania, it was pretty clear to see that horror was a larger share of demand in that market than other countries. The insight for Portugal requires a bit more digging. So I've flagged Portuguese audiences as being sports fans. Show you how I got to that. So here we're looking again at the genre breakdown of Portuguese audience demand in the first quarter. And this is just to show that the genre breakdown is actually very similar to the global average. Not much stands out at this level. The closest thing to a distinguishing feature here is that animation and children's genres make up a much smaller share of demand, but it wasn't even the smallest share of the markets we looked at. And to see that sports insight, you really have to dig deeper into the show level. So here's what I mean. And I should mention that we're not looking at demand for live sports. This is specifically sports related shows, sports themed shows, sports adjacent series. So not live sports. All right, so here I picked out 2 actually driving sports series that rank much more highly in Portugal than they do globally. So first we have the Grand Tour. Its global rank is 121, so not really even in the top 100, not that outstanding, but in Portugal it ranks number 30, so much better performance in the Portuguese market. Similar story with Formula One Drive to Survive. So its global rank is 77. In Portugal, it comes in at number 33. But it's not just driving sports that Portuguese audiences love. So I've also picked out All or Nothing Tottenham Hotspur. This did really well in Portugal. It made it into the top 20 compared to its global rank of 52. And this is, of course, a soccer documentary about this British soccer team. So it wasn't immediately clear to me why this one jumped so much in Portugal. But doing a little bit more digging, I discovered that the manager of the team is actually Portuguese. So a little bit of local preference coming through there for that one particular character in this documentary. And of course, we also have Ted Lasso. So this isn't a sports documentary, but a sports comedy about I guess, again, a British soccer team. So this ranked number 40 in Portugal for the quarter and had almost 3 times the average series demand. So we see sports preferences in Portugal kind of span genres. And next I wanted to call out, this doesn't have anything to do with sports, but I thought it was such an interesting insight. I wanted to just flag it and bring it to your attention. Warner ranks more highly in Portugal than it does globally. So it comes in at 69 in Portugal. Its global rank is 92. Why is this? Kind of a similar story to Tottenham Hotspur. The lead actor here, you can see, Alba Batista. She's from Portugal. So we see how, with this series as an example, local stars can really boost demand for a show in the market. And I also wanted to call out, Warrior Nun was one of our finalists for the most in-demand new series premiere at the Global TV Demand Awards in 2020. So we actually sat down and had an interview with Alba Baptista and the executive producer of the show to talk about what made it so popular last year. So that's a really great interview. You can give it a watch on our website. So check it out if you're interested. All right, moving on. So next we have India, and this was my personal favorite market to analyze this quarter. I think you'll be able to tell that as we get into it. We're going to spend a bit more time on this just because there's so much that makes the demand landscape in this country unique. So I've identified that India is really a competitive market for local platforms. All right, so here we're looking at the share of demand for originals from these platforms in India. And the thing that jumps out here is we have not just the standard international platforms that pop up in every market we look at, but we have 2 local platforms carving out a respectable share of demand in India for the quarter. In the lead between those 2 is Z5. That has a 4.6% share of demand. So demand for its originals actually was greater than Disney Plus's originals in India this quarter. I thought that was interesting. We also have Hotstar coming in at a 3.3% share of demand for the quarter. Now, the presence of these local streamers with highly in-demand content has really squeezed the demand shares of other platforms. We see that with Netflix falling below 50% here. The other platforms getting pinched in that, that sort of quarter there. The exception to this is Amazon Prime Video. This platform, the content from Amazon has actually really succeeded in India, and that's because they're producing highly in demand local content for the Indian market. So they, despite the local platform headwinds they're facing, they have a larger share of demand here than they do in other markets. And the 17% share of demand for Amazon Prime Video originals in India is much larger than its global average. If you remember, that was about 12%. So really standing out in India. And we can see these trends only accentuated more when looking at dramas specifically. So not just 2 local Indian platforms making the cut here, but we have 4 coming through. So again, Z5 with the largest share of demand, 7% share. Behind them, Hotstar. But we also have Voot and Alt Balaji with 3.3% share and 2.7% share respectively. And again, these have pushed Netflix below that 50% share threshold, which is really notable in the drama genre because Netflix is normally so dominant in this genre specifically. And a similar story with Amazon Prime Video. They have an even larger share of demand for dramas here, 17.9% share. This is the largest share of demand for Amazon Prime Video dramas of all the markets we looked at, well above the global average. So we see them continuing to succeed in India despite local competition. Now, shifting the lens a bit, we're looking at genres again here. We see Indian audiences gave 56.4% of total demand for digital originals for a drama series. And that is much larger than the global average, which is 49%. And of the 10 markets we looked at in the report, India by far had the largest share of demand for dramas. And that's really, I think, being driven by the robust supply of local dramas coming from these local platforms, like we saw. And again, you can see this coming through when looking at the top subgenres. So 6 of the top 10 subgenres for the quarter in India are dramas. This was the only market in our report where crime drama took the #1 spot. That's of course helped by Mirzapur, which is a crime drama. I also want to call out that thriller and political drama rank exceptionally high here. So some market-specific taste differences are clear in India when you look at the subgenres. All right, so getting into show level insights. So I want to call out that the top local digital originals in India still are coming from global platforms. So like I said, #1 for the quarter, the most in-demand series in India, most in-demand digital original series in India was Mirzapur from Amazon Prime Video. Coming in at #3, that's The Family Man, again from Amazon. And I will call out, so I think this is either currently releasing new episodes or just wrapped up its latest season and actually shot up to become the most in-demand series globally. So I think in future quarters, we're going to see actually The Family Man move to the forefront. And ranked #5 for this quarter in India is Netflix's Sacred Games. So even though the top most in-demand digital original series that are local are from international platforms, we see local platforms still really succeeding with their original series. And this one was interesting. So this series, Scam 1992, was the top ranked digital original from a local platform. And it was ranked #7. It had 26.2 times the average series demand. But what surprised me was this wasn't from one of those platforms we saw that had a relatively large demand share. This was from Sony Live, which jumped out at me as being a unique series. So Sony Live has really succeeded with this series in particular as the most in-demand digital original from a local platform in India. And you see content from other platforms also ranking very highly in India. So of course, Hotstar, we've got Special Ops ranking #12 for the quarter, Criminal Justice at #16. Voot has Asur ranked at #9, so in the top 10. And next they've got the Rykar case ranking at #50. And Z5, so that platform with the largest share of demand of all the original platforms. Their 2 top ranked series are Abe, coming in at #21, and Rangbaz coming in at #36. So I thought this was interesting because even though they had the largest share of demand for their original series, their top ranked original didn't even make it into the top 20. So they seem to have a good quantity of content, but didn't have a super highly in demand series this quarter at least. And interesting to note, Z5 just launched in the US. So not only are they succeeding in their home market, but they are expanding internationally. So we're going to be watching to see how they do in their new market. All right, and next we have Thailand. And I think this provides a really interesting contrast to India. So if India was a story about local platforms succeeding in their home market, Thailand is a battleground for international streamers and in particular Asian streamers. So let me show you what I mean by that. All right, here we're looking at the share of demand for original series from each of these platforms. You'll notice that a lot of these platforms have a larger share of demand in Thailand than they do in other markets we looked at. So the exception, of course, being Netflix, which has the smallest share of demand for originals in Thailand of the 10 markets we looked at. So normally it's notable when Netflix falls below 50% share. Here it's fallen below 40% share. It's really being squeezed by the high demand in Thailand for content from these other platforms. A few things to call out. Apple TV Plus achieved its largest demand share in Thailand of all the markets we looked at. And I believe it was the only market we looked at where it had a larger share of demand than the share of demand for Hulu originals. So that's notable. But also Disney Plus, Hulu, Paramount Plus, and HBO Max, these platforms all had a larger share of demand in Thailand than their global share of demand. So that's notable. And looking at how these demand shares have shifted over time, we really see this quarter, in particular, Disney Plus growing their demand share and sharply cutting into Netflix's demand share. We also see Apple TV Plus growing its demand share each month this quarter. So those two have had strong growth in Q1 of 2021. So 2 insights I wanted to call out for the Thai market in particular. One, non-action adventure series from Disney Plus succeed in Thailand. So not surprising, we see WandaVision, The Mandalorian, Falcon and Winter Soldier. These are all successful in Thailand. They're successful everywhere. That's not surprising. These are globally popular hits. They do well in most every market. What did stand out to me was that Disney Plus's non-action adventure, non-Marvel, non-Star Wars series really popped in Thailand. So here are 2 examples. That's Encore and The Right Stuff. These ranked exceptionally high here compared to other markets we looked at. And I think this is actually a really interesting and timely insight because Disney Plus Hotstar is launching in Thailand today. So that just worked out really well. And I think this is a good point to call out a unique strength of our demand data. So we can see demand for these series in a market before they're even technically available on a platform in that market. So we can get to these insights like this before the platform is even launched in Thailand. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the next thing I wanted to call out was it's not just content from these huge international platforms that we've been looking at in all these markets. Digital original content from numerous Asian platforms stands out in Thailand in a way it doesn't pop in other markets that we looked at. So here we have in the lead Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. That's from Tencent Video, available on WeTV in Thailand. But we also have shows from Line TV, Gaga Ooh La La, and View. So each of these are Asian streamers and they're producing content for Thailand. So it's really a heated battle for Thai audience attention, not just from international streamers, but from these Asian streamers as well. So interesting landscape here. And that brings us to the end of what I have prepared today. But I think we still have some time for some questions. So just give me a minute to see what questions I'm going to ask. So bear with me 1 second. We did have some questions come through ahead of the webinar, so I'll try to answer those as well. So let me just pull up some of those. All right, so a few of the questions we had come in advance of the webinar. Thank you for submitting those, appreciate it. So one question was, how do we measure demand share? This is a good question because you'll notice in this webinar, we looked at demand share in particular, and that could be share for a genre or share for content from platforms. So that's pretty simple how we get to that. So again, in this report, we're looking at digital originals. So we take the total demand for all digital original series in a market, and I guess I should say we take the demand for series in a genre or original to a platform, the total demand for that this quarter in a market as a share of total demand for all digital originals in that market. So that's how we get to that share measure. We also had someone ask about what the top performing animated shows for the quarter were. I thought this was a good question, and I pulled some quick data on this. So the most in demand, the globally most in demand, I should say, this of course will change depending on what market you're looking at, but the globally most in demand animated series for Q1 2021 was Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So again, we see Disney Plus really succeeding here with their original series. This came in at 29.5 times the average series demand for the whole quarter. And this was well ahead of the next most in demand animated series globally. That was BoJack Horseman with about 17 times the average series demand. Some other ones I made in the top 5, Harley Quinn at number 3, Love, Death, and Robots at number 4, and number 5, Star Trek Lower Decks. Thought that was interesting to see the Star Trek universe expanding into animation. But I do want to talk for a moment about Star Wars: The Clone Wars. That series trajectory has really been interesting to watch. So it actually concluded mid-2020. So series finale, no more episodes. despite that, it has stayed in audiences' minds well beyond its conclusion date. And I think that's really because of Disney Plus's adept use of franchise synergies. So we saw demand for the series spike while The Mandalorian season 2 was on. And if you know anything about those shows, you'll know there were actually some character crossovers. So interesting to see character crossovers from an animated series to a live action show. But when that happened, that spiked interest in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, despite it being concluded for months at that point. And it also has its own spin-off series now, Star Wars: The Bad Batch, so continuing to be at the forefront of audiences' minds well past its end date. Just a minute, let me see if there are any other questions. Okay, yeah, so this is a pretty straightforward question from Elizabeth. She asked, where does children's animation fall in subgenres? Is that under children's or animation? So that's a great question because, you know, shows don't necessarily fall into these clean-cut genre breakdowns. There are definitely gray areas, and children's animation is a great example of that. Is it children's or is it animation? So for the purposes of this, children's animation has fallen, we consider that children's. So you'll see that some of the top subgenres in some markets were cartoons. That was considered children's. So animated children's series are rolling up under children's. So good question. Thank you, Elizabeth. And one more question I want to touch on, we got from some of our friends in Australia ahead of today's webinar. And I know it's very early for our friends over in Australia. So hopefully they're able to catch this later, but I did want to touch on it. So they just asked if we had any trends for Australia, New Zealand. We actually got a few questions about this, so that's why I wanted to just touch on it briefly. So I pulled some top level insights. Again, similar to globally, WandaVision is the #1 original for the quarter here. Not much of a surprise, but some things that stood out to me in the Australian market in Q1 of 2021. So reality original series accounted for 3.2% of total demand for all originals. This is behind only the US in the markets we looked at. And the US, of course, has the largest share of demand for reality series at about 6%. But Australia, with 3.2%, this is much larger than other markets we looked at. So notable to call out, reality series are succeeding in Australia. I also want to call out that HBO Max originals are succeeding in Australia this quarter. So 6.4% of demand for all original series was for an HBO Max original in Australia. This is well above the global average share of demand for HBO Max, and it would make it the largest share of demand of the markets, the 10 markets we looked at in a report. So of particular note, The Flight Attendant did exceptionally well here. That ranked #9 for the quarter, had about 11 times the average series demand. But one other thing that I thought was unique to Australia, I saw that Doom Patrol from HBO Max really stands out here. And that was the highest ranked formerly DC Universe series. And that surprised me because usually we see Titans is the series from DC Universe that is really the most in demand. So something about Doom Patrol is succeeding in Australia. So those are the top level insights I pulled for Australia. And I know we did get quite a few questions for insights about particular countries ahead of time. So I apologize if we didn't cover a specific market you were looking for today. We only had time to touch on 5 in today's webinar, but there are 10 markets in the full report. And we do these reports quarterly, and every market we try to change up every quarter we try to change up the markets to give everyone some attention. And it's worth calling out that you can get daily updated data for 46 markets on Demand 360 Lite. So if you want insights on a particular market, that's really a great source. But I think we're at the end of time for today. So I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed sharing these insights with you today. So I hope to see you at the next Parrot Analytics Live webinar. Thanks so much.